We're back.
We're back.
Chapter 9 from the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene, which chapter 9 is to turn the tables, the counterattack strategy. I wanted to just open up with the scene from The Godfather where Sonny speaks out in the meeting with Salazzo and Vito Corleone stops him. But then after the meeting, he talks to him and he says, hey, Sonny, what's wrong with you? You never let anyone outside the family know what you're thinking, right? And so I'm playing it right here so people can see it. This is the scene where he says, hey, you never let anyone outside the family know what you're thinking. And I think that this came to mind because if you attack first, a lot of this chapter has to do with letting the other person attack first, letting the other person speak first, not know what your moves are, catch them by surprise so that you can counterattack.
Right.
And a lot of people don't have self-control of their emotions, and so they are the aggressive ones. They attack, and then it allows you to counterattack, which gives you a strength position. So I just thought I'd open up with that. What do you think? Because we're aggressive people. I've had to become more aggressive in business. How do you know when to be the first to attack with something that you want in business, let's say, or in life? And then how do you know when to wait, like Robert Greene is saying, and counterattack?
How do you know?
How do you know?
It's so difficult. It is so difficult. And, you have to read, like Robert Greene says, you have to read the terrain. You have to read your opponent, if you know anything about him, the character of your opponent, and try to use your weaknesses as strength and their strengths are weakness. It's a mind, it's like playing chess, right? And it's very difficult to tell. I grew up where there was an old Cuban saying that was, el que pega primero pega dos veces. The guy that hits first is able to hit twice. That's the translation, right? So I grew up with that idea, So I grew up with the idea you attack first. And that's not necessarily right all the time. I think it's more prudent as I've gotten older to see what's going to happen, wait it out. Because in today's day and age, we want everything immediately, and we'll have a tendency to attack first and therefore make mistakes. And the person that's sitting back a little bit and watching, they can capitalize on those mistakes. The counterattacker, what comes to mind? Canelo. They're saying that he's a fantastic counterattacker, He takes the punch, or they throw a punch at him, he evades it, but he's ready to come back already. Quickly. Apparently he's fast as lightning. So when you throw the punch, you open yourself up. And then he comes in that opening and hits you. You can translate that to business.
Yeah. But it's difficult, like you said, because
it's very difficult.
Because you have to be aggressive in business to survive.
No doubt about it.
There's no doubt about it. But it's reading the terrain. I think that goes for a lot of these chapters, these strategies of war. Understanding the terrain that you are in. Like they say Napoleon, right, was a master at strategist in understanding the terrain.
Oh my God.
And if you understand the terrain that you're in terms of, let's say, a negotiation, we're in the middle of several negotiations right now.
Correct.
But one in particular that we are being very aggressive with.
Yes.
Right? Because it's something we're pursuing, that we have a vision for. And so we feel that that's the correct thing. But then also knowing when to release the accelerator, because you can't be hitting it all the time full throttle. That some people maybe think that running through walls is the way to do it, and they maybe accomplish their goal that way, but there's a lot of damage in the process, right? You get beat up.
And you beat up a lot of people. So when you obtain your goal, if you need a team, is your team fully assembled to be with you? It's an art.
Right,
It's
you have
an
a lot
art.
of casualties.
It's an art, and it's tactfulness. It's exactly what you said. You press on the accelerator, and you know when to. It's like driving a stick shift. Okay, you gotta.
I need to learn how to drive a stick shift.
Oh, okay. Oh.
but yeah, knowing the dance, the yin and the yang, as we've talked about in previous, I think the laws of human nature that came up.
Yeah.
By Robert Greene. You mentioned using your weakness as your greatest strength. For example, when Greene brought up the fact that Napoleon was outnumbered in many battles, but he used the smaller army, the fact that he was small, as his strength of mobility. He was able to move much faster than these large, massive armies.
Correct.
And he called them corps, right? These smaller, I guess, battalions.
Yeah.
It's difficult, right? Because it's a weakness, but if everybody knows that that's your weakness, what Greene is saying here is you put it like to the forefront and somehow use that as a benefit, as a advantage.
If you realize it, he said you need, according to him, you have to have some introspect and get to know yourself. Like, who was it that said, Socrates? Know thyself, right? Know thyself. So, then you're able to fight your enemy. Because a lot of the times he's saying, and I know a lot of these things are subjective, but, they say, you are your own worst enemy. You have to fight your enemy within first, come to terms with yourself, and then you're going to be able to succeed. So a lot of times I've heard people say many times, look, if you make the first move, whether you're playing poker or you're buying a building or whatever it is that you're doing, you want to take out a young lady, on a date, whatever, because, your wife, you're dealing with your children, you name it, folks. We're negotiating constantly at all points in our life. But when you make your first move, what Napoleon was saying, or what Greene is saying, is, look, now you exposed yourself. Now the other side knows potentially what your next 2-3 moves potentially can be, because you already made this move, right? So you've kind of uncovered your hand a little bit if we're talking about poker, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting because what they're saying is you potentially have uncovered the path where the opponent, the enemy, can knock you off. And there's a lot to be said about that. He said that Napoleon fused together the offense with the defense. Mm-hmm. He was just, it's exact. What you said was, it's really, really good for a mental picture. You put your foot on the accelerator and then you take it off. You put it on, take it off. He was confusing the other armies. And, because he was just, going strong,
offensive,
coming back.
Defensive, offensive, defensive.
It's great. I mean,
and Greene was saying some people
brilliant.
Only know how. Oh yeah,
he was brilliant.
Some people only know how to play one. I think of in football, American football, you have an offensive team and then you have a defensive team. And so when you're playing offense, those guys are on the field. And then when it's time to play defense, you have another group of guys on the field. In soccer, it's the same team. You have to be able to play the 11 players that are on the field in soccer or football. You got to be able to play both offensive and defensive.
Turned up?
No, we're good.
We're good?
So what happens is that you play both, especially as a midfielder. For those who know, you're usually running up, so you're playing attacking, aggressive, and then you're also running back and
That's a
helping the
great
defense.
analogy, man.
So we have to in life be more like a midfielder as opposed to, let's say, in football, you know, one only aggressive or only defensive. Because only defensive doesn't work either. There
No.
are times where we need to be aggressive. It reminds me
Attack.
we have to. Earlier on in business, I was more defensive and more, let's say, timid, not as aggressive. And you would tell me you gotta necesitas más colmillo.
Yeah.
You need more
A longer tooth.
a longer canine
Yeah.
because you're gonna get run over. And there were times that I did, you know, I wasn't aggressive enough, and I lost an opportunity.
Well, same with me when I got started. But you know, as you continue to master your trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you continue to learn and you're on it, you learn. You learn from experience. And it got to a point where I could see them coming. You know, it got to the point where somebody would walk into my front door, and based on their body language, their demeanor, the words that they used, the tone of their voice, you could tell, you know, if that person was there to, you know, be okay and do good, or if that person was there to figure out what was the best edge that he could have to hurt somebody or whatever. Yeah. You know, and you do that, you learn it. You learn it with experience.
Sure.
There's nothing, you know, you can't solely rely on experience because you have to be in the trenches. But experience stands for something. There's something to be said about experience.
Our friend Art, I'll never forget, he said that he went through 2 schools.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember? It was...
the school of life or the school of the streets?
La calle, yeah,
La calle.
the streets.
The streets?
And then I think he said his father.
Oh, okay.
I think he said that his father taught him a lot, like in the work. He's in the iron work.
Right, right.
He's an iron worker. But
he said the streets taught him a lot.
The streets, and then his dad learning the business. Does something come to mind, a situation where you didn't take this strategy into account and you were too aggressive and somebody was able to get an edge on you because you were exposed, let's say? Does something come to mind like that? Because you're saying early on you were very aggressive.
Yes.
And not so much waiting back to see what happens.
Yeah, I know I've lost business for being overly aggressive, okay? And I think that looking back, I didn't read my opponent, let's say, carefully enough. Because there's something to be said about mirroring the person, okay? And if that person doesn't have the level of aggressiveness that you do, they're going to feel that you are infringing in their territory or whatever, especially if we're negotiating for something.
Yeah.
Like, for example, buying an agency or buying a property. So I don't know the answer, folks, but I do know this. Whatever you're negotiating for and with ever you are, for me, the most important way has been face to face, so I can read the person. And you don't have to, like in the wars, you know, you don't have to destroy your opponent and crush him to the point that you take every thread of, you know,
Life.
Yeah, that he's got or she. You know, you can create a business that, you know, is beneficial for the both of you. Of course, one will probably be a little better than the other, but you don't have to take every thread of dignity that the other party has. You can make it profitable.
A symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. Like
It's
right now, the
mutually
deal we're
beneficial.
in.
Mutually.
Yeah. Because if you're buying something, the seller's going to want to get the most he can for it or she, and the buyer's going to want to get, get it for the least amount possible, and then there's going to be a medium.
So I would challenge that, because that's not everybody's number one priority, and that's where it comes into reading the seller, reading the opponent, reading the other person. Their priority may be something other than just getting the most for it. It might be, for example, getting it as fast as possible.
Okay, well,
And getting it as fast as possible sold doesn't mean you're going to get the most for it, because you're going to potentially take lower offers that can perform extremely quickly. So that's just an example that you have to know and listen to what the seller actually wants, or whatever you're negotiating.
right, correct. But he says turning the table. So when Robert Greene says, let the other party, or if you have the patience to wait for the other party to make the first move, right? That exposes them. And then you're able to, based on that, come across with a counter attack or a counter strategy.
Yeah.
You have to have your your fingers on the pulse of whatever it is you're dealing with. You have to be involved if you want the best final result. Like, for example, there was one deal last year that you and I moved at the speed of light. We found out about the deal. We went to sell them the same day, and I think by the end of the day we made an offer, or before the day was over, and then the following day was an escrow. And after we did that, remember, there were like 3 or 4 other persons that said, "Hey, how did this happen?"
Yeah.
Well, it happened because we moved at the speed of light. We were very aggressive with whatever was needed and requested from us.
I look at that as a good opportunity doesn't wait.
Yes.
Somebody's going to jump on it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to, weigh your options when you're doing it.
When we're talking about counterattack, in racquetball, which you used to play, or in tennis, the serve usually is most popular, like most known. He's got a great serve or whatever. But I think you would talk about that you had developed your backhand really well, or that there was somebody that was really good at returning that serve. And that doesn't get, let's say, as much attention as somebody with a really good serve.
Right.
But if you can return a really good serve, that's the counterattack.
Right. Well, I played a lot of racquetball, and the serve is the killer shot. You put all your aggression, all your strength, everything into that shot, okay? If you are able to, some people would argue against that, because some people would start with a lob, and get it as close as possible to the wall on the bounce back, right? And throw it to the weakest part of your opponent, which would be the backhand, okay? So let's say, I don't want to get too much into it, but I played against guys that the backhand was just as powerful as their forehand. And so the only weakness there was to bounce it off the walls and try to catch him off balance or something. So there's a lot of strategy in the
racquetball.
Oh, I love it. I love it. You have ceiling shots, side shots, walls. I loved it. And it was a tremendous exercise in sport. And I think the same goes for, when you're negotiating for something, whether you're dealing with your wife, your daughter, your son, co-workers, you have to be aware of who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I remember someone that I thought was pretty sharp, and this particular person would be in negotiations and never tell anyone about it. It was more like a superstitious kind of thing, where if he thought that somebody knew about it, the deal would crumble and go under. Or maybe he was afraid that somebody would come in and try to take, I don't know, And so he never, ever shared or exposed to, and he would wait. I mean, the chapter's talking about a tiger hunting, right? There was a small portion of it where, the tiger lies in wait,
Mm-hmm.
and the deer, by being afraid and running in a sudden way or something, sometimes, many times, gets themselves into the trap. So the tiger lies in wait, right?
Yeah.
And the deer smells them, something is not right, so takes off. And sometimes they run right into him, you know? So there's something to be said about letting the enemy take the first, step.
Yeah.
Although I grew up, where they were telling me, hey, the guy that punches first punches twice,
Right. So you gotta
You gotta,
see the situation. Another thing he talked about was retreating, and one of the things was there were two things about retreating that stuck to me. One of them was if after you attack, you have to retreat. It crumbles the spirit of, let's say, that army
absolutely.
or that person. You attacked and you're in a situation where you're forced to retreat. The spirits now are low. However, if you're in a situation where you're retreating to survive another day, and kind of like what Napoleon was doing, where he was fight aggressive and then would pull back his forces, retreating is not the same as flight.
Right, and he was expressing his strategy to his soldiers. So the morale was maintained.
Right. It wasn't out of, we need to retreat because, we're fleeing a bad situation. It was,
We're doing this on
intentional.
purpose.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. It's interesting, we've talked about, we play chess. And in chess, if you have to retreat, I've always seen retreating as not a good thing in chess. But maybe there are some people who don't look at it that way, and they're able to, hey, I can't attack through here. I'm just going to come back and then attack
Well,
another
if you're
side.
retreating and you're luring the opponent into like a corner or whatever,
Yeah.
then that's a strategic retreat, right?
Yeah.
Because you're luring him. Hey, I'm going to go this way, and you perceive it as a weakness, and you're going right after it, and you don't see all the moves. And then once you move, okay, so it depends. True. You know what you just reminded me of? About 20 years ago, I don't know, I hired this gentleman. He was an excellent person. He worked for me, and he was a very strong, physically strong, powerful man. And I remember one day a couple came in with another very strong, powerful young man. The couple was younger. And they were discussing something about a policy. This is in the insurance business. And the conversation got very heated. And I felt it. I was in the other office. The conversation really, really got bad over the policy. And so I took it upon myself to come into the office. And either one of them could have destroyed me physically with one finger. These were powerful men. They had done wrestling, and one was young, the other one was my employee. Long story short, we were able to diffuse the situation, which you could cut the stress level, with a knife in the air. It was bad. It was at a point where I thought they were going to throw punches over a policy, for crying out loud. And so once we diffused it, and I was like a mediator and this and that, and it was very tenseful, and I remember sweating bullets. And once the couple left, I turned to my employee and I said, wow, that was tough. How did you let yourself get cornered like that? Because the client's always right. So with that premise, you never argue with the client. How did you let yourself, how did that happen? And his reply was, I don't know, but I'm glad you came into the room, because a kid that strong and that young, you never let him throw the first punch. So he was ready to punch him.
Oh my God.
And this was, you know who I'm talking about. This was a gentle man. Gentle. His demeanor was always very gentle, very, but he was powerful. He had done wrestling. He had gone through football, and he was in the not the Navy. What was it? Navy or, I mean, he had done service for the country. He was a powerful man. But the kid that came in was, like 25 years younger than him or 20. And he said, I don't know how that happened, Pablo, but I'm glad you walked in, because a kid like that, you don't let him throw the first. He was ready to punch that. If that guy would have gone up, he would have punched. And I look back at that, and sometimes I say, wow, how things can get escalated. I'll never forget it.
Very quickly.
Oh my God. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there because, I had, but you can feel it, folks. You can feel it in the air, when things are getting hairy and.
Yeah, if you're getting caught up and emotional in a situation, something that's happened, an email you got, a text you got, a call you got, take a step back. Sometimes respond the next day.
Yeah.
Or I know for me that's made a big difference.
Oh, for me too.
Because in the moment I feel it's the correct thing, what I'm gonna say, and respond immediately. And I think immediately is how it needs to get resolved. And maybe in some instances, but most of the time, I look back and I revise what I was gonna do because it was not the correct approach. Thinking it out, hey. And also you don't have to correct everybody every time they make a mistake.
Yeah.
You have to, figure out what battle you want to get into.
Yeah.
When do you actually want to counterattack? You had talked about shadowing earlier, and there was a section of this chapter, the strategy 9, where Greene gets into those samurai. They were called Shinkage samurai.
Incredible.
Shinkage samurai, and they were it was a mirror or shadow school of fighting. So you would come in and make a move when I was gonna fight you, and then I would make the exact same move. It's kind of like what kids do, where they imitate somebody.
It's very annoying.
It's very annoying, and they would do it to the point where they would get the opponent so annoyed and irritated that they would make a move, and they would counter it and kill the person.
Right.
And that was a school of fighting that these guys were almost unbeatable samurai. Can you imagine that?
Oh.
Because you get under the person's skin.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I've seen it happen in business meetings.
Yeah.
Where the manager comes out and he has an agenda because the company has an agenda. And the company has, said, hey, we need to disseminate this to the forces. We're the selling people, right? So we're the selling force. It's got to come down to us. Hey, we're taking this discount away, or we're adding this to the policy, or there's going to be a surcharge or whatever, right? And the manager is the one that delivers that. So he's like, how they say, don't kill the messenger? He's the messenger. And I've seen some very interesting exchanges in meetings, where people are not willing to accept that change, and they want that change not to be provided, but it's too late. It's already been, made a decision at the higher up. This was a Fortune 500 company that I was working for, and they allowed you within them to have your own business, right? And so I've seen, I'm telling you, explosions of it. It's very interesting. And then what do? If something like that escalates at that level, hopefully you have enough managerial savviness to be able to, diffuse that. Because, you're just delivering a message to a great extent.
Right.
Once a decision is made, it's very difficult. Unless there's something that can be really proven that, hey, this is really a fallacy. This is really not going to help anybody, the company, the client, this and that.
I think even then, when a decision's made, sometimes some companies just go through with it. It would be great if a company really hears its people out and actually takes back decision that maybe is negative, but I haven't seen that too many times, personally. What else called out to you from this chapter?
Well, I love that phrase that he said that he merged, he fused, the attack with the retreat,
Yeah.
the offensive with the defensive.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness. No wonder everybody was afraid. Even when that Austrian general, I think it was Karl Marx, but I'm not sure on this, folks. They knew that they had Napoleon outnumbered 2-1. But Napoleon said, hey, I'm willing to listen to a truce. And the guy said, let's do this, because even though we outnumber him 2-1, he's a force to contend with. I don't want to mess with him. Let's see if we can get this done. It ended up that it was a masterful trick on the side of Napoleon. And he showed a level of weakness that really wasn't there. He showed that he was confused, this and that, and the enemy took the bait. What do they say? Full line and sinker, whole line and sinker.
Yeah.
And they paid dearly for it. Many of their soldiers died when they, because Napoleon was playing them. So, it's like...
He made it look like he was confused, not in a good state of mind. And the emissary went back with that message. And so they thought we got him.
Right.
But it was all planned.
And you know what? Napoleon requested to talk to, I believe it was the Tsar, but the Tsar didn't go.
No.
He sent someone. And that's what I'm talking about. You need to have your fingers on the pulse. You need to be entrenched. What was it that you quote all the time in Carlitos' Way? If you can't see the angles, get out, or something like that. Is that what? Is that it from that movie?
I think so.
We love mafia movies, folks. It's one of our downfalls, okay?
Yeah, I think it's from Carlitos'
Carlitos' Way. He says, if you can't see the angles, it's time to get out.
Yeah.
So, and believe me, I delegate a tremendous amount because it gives me freedom to do other things. But I don't know that delegating going to see Napoleon Bonaparte on a truce was the right thing to do for the Tsar. Mm-hmm. I think that's a meeting you should attend. What do I know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's tremendous. I mean, and you see it all the time. He quotes Warren Harding, the Republican nominee for president. They played that strategic there too. He talked about the
Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Yeah, and the Indian tribe, was it the Comanche? How they had to. It's incredible, folks. The Comanche were beating the U.S. government, okay? They were beating them in the fields. They were destroying them. And then a couple of deserters from the Comanche, I think it was the Comanche, joined the government, and they taught them the strategies of the Comanches, and that's how they defeated them, with their own strategy. They couldn't figure them out, and then when they defected, they gave the information to the enemy, because they were fighting each other to the death, and then they used that to come in and knock them all completely out.
Yeah. Wow.
You talk about reading a book for its historical component and learning that kind of thing, but that changed the landscape and affected the lives of thousands and thousands of people. The Comanche, you learn from history, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In soccer, in football, in high school, I remember that our coach would say that one of the most dangerous, when you're in the middle of a game, one of the most dangerous scores to have is you be ahead by, it was either 1-0 or 2-0. I want to say it was 1-0.
Okay.
And what
My
happened was,
question is why?
well, and specifically at halftime. So at halftime, you're up 1-0, your team. And it's the most dangerous point to have, according to my coach, because you think you're winning, because you are by 1 point, but you're going into the second half relaxed, more defensive, let's say. But the counterattack, which is what Greene's talking about, these people are coming in aggressive. They know all they have to do is tie it up, and the mood of the whole team changes. Because the moment you tie a game and you're 1-1, the team that was winning all of a sudden is diffused, and the team that just scored that goal all of a sudden has a burst of energy, and quickly they can get that second goal in because they're on a high, and they're feeling and they just turn, the tables have just turned. So this counterattack reminded me of in high school. He would say that, and
That's very interesting, Mike.
and it did happen to us. I remember him saying it one time. This is the most dangerous, and it did happen to us one time where we were up 1-0, and sure enough, they came back and they beat us.
Oof.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's interesting, and there's a lot to it. They have something to prove because they're going in the second half already down, and you're relaxed because you're winning. You can't just play defensive. You're gonna lose. So this applies to life.
I remember a doctor, family member of our family. He was very much into soccer, and
Oh yeah.
and he was, of Mexican descent, a fantastic cardiologist. We miss him dearly, and I remember him getting upset because the Mexican team, at that particular time, I'm going back, I don't know how many years, but he would say, look at that. We came out of halftime and we were 2-0 or something like that. And look at us now. Now we're down by 1. And you watch, he would tell me, you watch, Pablo, we're going to lose this game. And sure enough, and he was fuming. He was a very calm, collected individual, but inside he loved these things, and he was just fuming about it. He goes, oh, we do the same thing all the time. He was saying.
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing anybody, folks,
The Mexican national team.
No, I don't know enough about soccer to say anything.
Well, they've struggled.
But that was what his take was.
Yeah. He was a huge fan.
Huge. I remember when they played Argentina, it was a big battle in the house,
Yeah.
because the wife is Argentinian, and so it was a huge, There would be they would set 2 tables, right? And the Argentinian team had, all the meats and everything, and then the Mexican team had one taquito, 2 taquitos, tamales. Oh, wait a minute, no. Oh, I'm shifting.
The meats
Give
were
me another
better
shirt. Give me another shirt. Those were the beautiful, good old days.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I got sidetracked. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry.
But excellent chapter. Excellent strategy.
I still need to learn. Folks, just so that you get an idea, Robert Greene, the level of research that he does, I got to go back and read this again and get another book, because the Battle of Austerlitz for Napoleon Bonaparte, it's so confusing if you're not following it.
Yeah.
Because Greene says, hey, well, was it Greene that said this? You correct me. Napoleon pulled a victory out of a bag that was only filled with defeats. He was defeated. He was done for, right? And he pulled a victory out of defeat. With that, I really like your analogy. I'm never going to forget it. You press the accelerator, you let the accelerator go, you press it. He was going back and forth.
Yeah, until he had taken over.
He won the Battle of it's hard for me, Austerlitz,
and he had taken over what's called the Pratzen Heights, and he made he had taken it over, and then he abandoned it. And so he made the Russians and the Austrians come in.
That's it.
And he made them do the first move by him retreating from there.
They felt that was a weakness. They could take him.
All of a sudden, he appears in another section where the Austrians and the Russians had spread themselves somewhat thin, and so this was like one of the weakest point, the middle of their army forces. All of a sudden, he attacks that, and he
picked up their headquarters, I believe. I hope I'm not doing something wrong.
He broke through, and then right away he ends up gaining the Pratzen Heights again. So yeah, no, it was really cool. I had to go through that section maybe 3-4 times to really understand it.
Me too.
Yeah.
I mean, I got it now that you explained it, but yeah.
Yeah, no,
I mean, it's brutal, but it's fun.
And he gets the victory. And apparently it was the largest, it was his biggest victory
of his career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sun Tzu wrote which book?
The Art of War?
Was it The Art of War? Yeah, right? The Art of War. Which Robert Greene quotes a lot. When surprised, take the enemy itself by surprise. So he's talking about, again, when you're surprised, your weakness, take the enemy itself by surprise. That was one of the quotes. Turning things on them, like jujitsu, using their strength against them. Staying calm. And I thought one of the really cool examples also was a descendant, was it a son of Sun Tzu? It was one of his descendants gave advice to one of the generals, and a key general, I believe, Chi general. And he would say, look, every night you're gonna light a large amount of campfires around your tents.
Oh, brilliant.
And then the following day you're gonna light less, and the following day less, and the following day less, until the Wei general assumes that you're retreating, and then they attack first. They attacked these armies.
The people were defecting.
He thought that they were defecting. Yeah, he thought that they were abandoning.
That's why the number of lights were diminishing.
They weren't.
No, they got them good. I mean,
I remember in The Art of War.
That's crazy.
Oh, yeah. Those are strategies.
Oh.
In The Art of War, Sun Tzu would talk about the drums, using like the drums as a way of like making your army seem bigger, and the flags. And these were all strategies that they would use. They were master strategists.
They mess around with your psychology.
Yeah.
I mean, like the guy that was I forget exactly right now, but he was
Greeks?
playing a violin or something at the edge of the town on a pedestal or an arch, and he was completely defeated. Or they would have taken him by storm, but the general comes over and says, "That's him up there. Why is he so calm?" And he took his army and turned around and left. I have to get the details on that one.
I think that one was in. Was that in The Laws of Human Nature?
Maybe.
Brush up, yeah, because that was a really.
You know who could answer that? Robert Greene.
Robert Greene, help us out.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting one. They're like, there's no way that he's
going to be so calm up
in
there
the middle of the town.
Yeah, at the entrance of the town, where there was like an arch or something. He was he put himself on top of the arch, and he
must be up to something.
He must be up to something, because he was known as a tricky type of guy. But in this particular case,
he was defeated.
He had a small army, and things were not. They would have crushed him.
And they survived for another
And the
day.
general said, "No, he's up to something. I'm not walking into that town." And he turned around and.
That's right. Yeah, they had very little army there.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I love it, and that's why I say that these books, as we're reading them, they're transforming us.
Absolutely.
That's the beauty of this podcast.
Thank you to everybody for
for
following and supporting, and we're enjoying the journey, and we hope you guys are too. Thank you for all the comments, the likes,
and new things to come.
We're
exciting
almost,
new things.
almost at 2,000 subscribers.
Right.
And we're a little over 2 years into this
Yeah.
journey. All right, we'll
All
wrap
right.
it up. Thank you.